Hello, this is Kristen Hargrave, and today we are talking about the future of education for the Pakistani youth. So, education in Pakistan, especially for elementary and secondary, like high school level, has continuously been underfunded and underprioritized by the local governments and by the country's government on a whole level. It's also been underrepresented. They have, in recent decades, had threats from the Taliban, and dozens of schools have actually been bombed and pretty much completely destroyed. They also have a lack of supplies, they have a lack of teachers, students, and for many years, the poverty levels have been a cause for dropouts, where they just can't afford to go to school, or parents can't afford to send their children who could be helping in the home. And another big aspect for education in Pakistan is the madrasas, which are more religious educational schools. So over the years, we have seen gradual improvements. Here's a chart that tracked the literacy rate in Pakistan from 1951 to 2009. As you can see, in the 50s, the total literacy rate hovered around 16-17%, slightly higher for males and slightly lower for the females. But then as we get closer to the 2000s, we see an increase from 16% up to 57% on a total level. So what we're noticing is that each new generation is more literate than the predecessors. One thing that was interesting was noticing that the neighbor to Pakistan, Iran, at the point in the 1950s, they were actually had an even lower literacy rate than Pakistan. And they are now, in the 2000s, nearing a 90% literacy rate because they invested heavily with their oil revenues into education and healthcare and some different programs there. So with increases in awareness, we've been seeing more schools. The former Minister of Education for Punjab, Mian Irman Masood, was a big part of this kind of turning point, that he wanted to create programs for women empowerment and development that would start in elementary school, and really worked hard to incentivize young girls to enroll in school and to attend and take their classes. He also just advocated for free education for all children, which in his time as the Minister of Education, that was a very foreign idea, and it had not ever been a possibility or an option beforehand. So it actually required billions of dollars of investment, and I think the total was 90 million that he needed for his, or 90 billion, I'm sorry, for his plan, and he was given 1 billion. So his kind of trial one, putting it all in together, he actually gained a lot of traction and a lot of awareness from other foundations. And so the World Bank actually came in and did a third-party evaluation of the program and system that they were attempting to put in place, and were very encouraged by what they saw. And so they also invested about 300 million into this program to help get students enrolled, to get them the supplies, the infrastructure that they needed. So they invested in the boundary walls around the schools to help keep students safe, and also in furniture, so they would all have chairs and desks and free books. And then they also gave a stipend of kind of pocket spending money for the young girls to be able to be encouraged to go to school. So I think the goal was, if they could get them there, then just the power of education itself would kind of take root in their hearts and they'd be encouraged to keep going. So now we have both English and Urdu being taught in many elementary schools side by side. Before, it was only done in secondary and not necessarily in all of the schools at the beginning, but it has become more compulsory to have the two languages. They also have more supplies. We are seeing most of the improvement in urban areas, but they are gaining traction in many rural areas as well. It's just kind of slower going. And we do have a much higher increase in girls' enrollment, and we're seeing that carry through elementary school. It does dip down when we get to the secondary area, but vast improvements over the last few decades. Both Erman Masood and Dr. Ali Jamar have really been getting vocal about the need for education and for the future state of the people of Pakistan. Here are a couple of videos that are about an hour each, but they really emphasize, the involvement that is needed from people themselves in the country, but then also, kind of a call for aid from those around the world who just see education as a priority and a basic right for individuals. Along with that, with this particular class, we've also learned about Malala Yousafzai, who is a very strong advocate for the education of women. And then the video features Dr. Amar Ali Jan, who is a big advocate for personal growth, I guess, on a whole, but especially with higher education. He wants to see more youth being able to get into college, to graduate, but then he also has a call to the government to provide jobs for these graduates. So many of them graduate and have no job to get into. And it's a big kind of, you need to know the right people and have the right connections kind of a situation. And then Mian Imran Masood spent years focusing on trying to grow and develop the education for the younger children and help that carry them through into future pursuits. So with their, paving the way, we're seeing a lot more awareness come about, and I do feel like, as with Iran, who took the time and the funds to really heavily invest and get some good programs and systems in place, they're now seeing a drastic improvement from the 1950s, when their literacy was around 15% to now being 90%. And so I see that as some of these advocates and their ideas are taking traction and getting hold of the populace, that hopefully in another few decades there will be just a great improvement overall for the education in Pakistan. And here are my references.